Right, hello, this is a video giving you a quick rundown on how to change a laptop LCD panel. I'm changing the panel in this Dell Inspiron laptop because it's got a bit of a flicker on it. You know, when you adjust the display angle, it's just all over the place basically. This is normally caused by the ribbon cables along the top of the panel going bad. Sometimes it can be the display cable. But the only way really is just to start replacing bits and seeing what happens. Thankfully on this one, because it's an old laptop, I bought an entire assembly. I've got the panel, the inverter and the display cable, so I've got a sure thing basically. Right, the tools I'm using for this, I've got a 00 Phillips screwdriver. That's a magnet I've got attached to it, just makes it easier for me to pick up screws. I've also got a flathead precision screwdriver just in case I need it. I'm also using a plastic prime tool. These are widely available on eBay. They're very handy because they don't leave marks on the plastic when you're breaking clips open. And then I've just got a selection of other screwdrivers for general screws. The main one I use is just a #1 Phillips there. Right, first thing you've got to do, on some laptops you need to remove the display assembly to get the bezel off. This is only a select few. Any laptop that has visible hinges like this one, it's not a problem at all. This bezel will come straight off the front without having to do anything. If you've got to remove the display assembly for the laptop, it's quite a more involved job. You've got to start taking things apart. I'm not going to cover that in this video. This is just for the easy ones. But as I say, 9 times out of 10, you can take the bezel off without removing anything else. First thing we've got to do is identify where the screws are. There's going to be one in each corner for a start, and sometimes you'll find another couple under pads like here and here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use my flathead screwdriver just to pry these rubber feet off. These normally stick straight back on, so just try and make sure that the glue comes off on the pad and not on the screw. But if it comes off on the screw, it's not a big deal. You don't need a lot of glue to hold these things on, so they will always go back on anyway. So again, I'm just going to literally just savage these off. Yeah, there we go, the glue stayed on that screw. What I'll do though is I'll just remember that screw goes in the bottom right with that pad that doesn't have any glue on it. Not a problem. It's 4, and I'm just going to remove one of these to see if there's any screws under here as well. Yep, there is. So those ones in the middle have got to come off as well. Okay, right. I'll use my #1 screwdriver just to drill out these screws. Normally a bit apt with a screwdriver, but I'm doing this cack-handed so I don't cover what I'm doing to the camera. One more. This one's got the glue still stuck on it. I'm just digging my screwdriver straight into that so I don't disturb the sticky pad on the screw, and then that will just stay on there, so when you reassemble you don't have to replace the glue. Right, okay, now that's done, these bezels will literally just pull off. You need to use a little bit of brute force in moderation. It requires a bit of a nerve the first couple of times you do it. I normally start off on any long edge. I just put my nail on the inside of the bezel there and just see, there we go, that one's just pulling straight off. And then for good measure I get my prime tool and I just run that along the gap, and that will just start prising the clips open. Sometimes you have to do a little bit of prime back and forth, but these clips are very rarely strong. Normally it will just pop off like you're seeing here. And then the bottom line can often cause problems. The bottom clips tend to be a lot stronger. Obviously that's catching on something. You've just got to sort of slowly tweak it, there we go, tweak it around until you find the right angle. Right, so bezel off. I'm just going to put that to one side over there. Right. This laptop's got a hideously small 14-inch screen, so there's quite a lot of space to play with here. More modern laptops have got a very narrow bezel, but it's the same procedure for all of them. The rough components are, you've got the LCD panel there, obviously. This fella down here is the inverter that powers the backlight. So if you've got a very faint picture but no illumination, that's normally the culprit 9 times out of 10. Modern laptops use LED panels, and LED panels, because they're DC, they don't require this AC inverter. So older laptops have these, the latest laptops do not. So as I say, don't be alarmed if you can't see this, because it's probably an LED panel anyway. Right, now there's 2 ways of doing this. Sometimes you need to take out all this framework that the panel is attached to. Sometimes you don't. It's just a matter of undoing screws until it comes off. You've just got to be careful to support whatever you take off so nothing falls. But in this case, most of the time, there's screws going down the side of the panel, and by removing those you can just take the panel straight out without having to undo any of the other framework. So I'm just going to take these screws out. These screws are often a little bit smaller, but they're still a little bit too big for my 00 there, so I'm going to go in with the #1 Phillips again. That's 1. That's 2. There are usually 4 a side, which is the case here. There's number 4. One other bit of advice I would give: if you're changing the laptop panel because it's actually broken or it's smashed, you've got to watch out, because if it's smashed, if it was smashed because the laptop was dropped or excessive force, sometimes the frame can actually be physically bent. So you have to watch once you've taken the panel out and actually just make sure that these are actually straight, because otherwise when you put the new panel in, you may flex it trying to bend it back into the frame, which will just snap your shiny new LCD panel, and then you'll be out 50 quid or whatever it costs you. So again, just make sure that everything is straight here while you're doing this. All of this stuff will just bend back into shape. You just got to use a little bit of GBH and ignorance, and that will straighten out just fine. Right, last screw. When the last one comes out, you just got to watch out that the panel doesn't literally sort of fall out. I mean, if the panel is broken, it doesn't really matter, but you don't want it to fall on anything or just strain the cable or anything like that. This one's actually staying in place quite well. Now the screws are out, I should just be able to pull that out like so. Now I'm going to be very careful because we've got the display cable coming up the back here. I'm just going to lay that down flat on the front of the laptop. The cable's normally long enough to do this. If it's not, you've just got to stick your hand down the back and just slowly do things the hard way. Now there's on this one, because I've got an inverter, I've got 2 points. I've got this inverter cable. On Dells, this is always just a flat connector that pulls straight away, like so. Sometimes it's a side thing that you've got to pull out the side. Just have a look and just use your common sense, basically. Then the actual LCD connector, this usually has some tape across it, so just pull that tape off or cut it off, whatever you prefer. Then the connector itself, sometimes these are locking and sometimes they're not, so you can spot the locking ones because it'll have 2 little arms on each side that will press in. So I'm just going to get my hand underneath that cable so I've got a good purchase, squeeze that in, and that will just pop off like that. And there we have it. Right, and now the panel is out. So these ribbons along the top here, under this do not touch tape, those are the ones that have gone on this panel. Although it says do not touch, they're not that delicate, but you know, if you don't have to touch it, then don't. But you know, just slightly brushing that with your hand isn't going to damage it. Just don't put any pressure on it. Don't hold the panel by it or anything like that. So yeah, if you're replacing the panel, if you don't have a replacement inverter, these inverters are usually just screwed to the bottom of the panel. If I just move this tape out the way that's on the bottom there, you can see This one's sort of riveted on, but usually there are just some small screws there, and if you just take the screws off, this inverter will just come off, and then you can screw it onto your new panel. There is a small cable going to the back of it there. That's the AC cable from the backlight to the inverter. This fella carries high voltage for the cold cathode that powers the backlight in these older panels. It only goes in one way, so when you plug it in, if it's not clicking in good and firm, then you've got it the wrong way around. So yeah, that's that. Right, we don't need him anymore, so we'll get that out of the way. Let's just break into this reconditioned panel that I purchased. Right, now I'm just going to lift that directly out. I'm not going to hold it by one side. I'm supporting it on both ends there. Now, as I said, I've got a reconditioned panel here that's got everything, so as you can see, it's already attached. I can easily reuse this stuff if I want, and in fact I'm going to, because by reusing this cable I don't have to take all this off to get to the other end of the cable. So I'm just going to unplug that. Whoever's the laptop that this has come off, they've obviously broken it for parts or something, because they haven't bothered removing this cable, so I'm just going to take that off in the same way. There we go. I'm just supporting this panel with my hands, with my palm on the front there. It's perfectly safe to do that as long as you're not being silly with it, you know. But don't apply pressure. You're just supporting the panel, and it'll be happy with that. Right, now I can just lay that down on the front here, like I did with the previous one, and reconnect this cable. So at this point, I don't want to put any pressure on the top here. So you've just sort of got to find somewhere where you can support the panel while you push that connector in. It's not particularly difficult, it's just a bit fiddly. There we go. That's just clicked in like that, so that's not coming out now. Sometimes this cable is sort of stuck down to the back of the panel, so if that's the case, you can just sort of stick that back down if you want. Just reconnect the inverter just by pushing that back in. Job's a good one. Right, now I'm just going to lift that up. On this particular panel I've also got the do not touch tape down the side here, so I'm just going to be a little bit careful with where I hold the panel there, and then I'm just going to bring that up onto the top again like so. And there we go. Right, I'm lucky enough that this is just staying in place under its own weight, but if you're not lucky enough then you've just got to hold it all in place while you do this, so it's just luck of the draw really. Right, I'm just getting one screw on each side of the panel so it supports itself. If you can't get these holes to line up, you know, you can just push the panel up with one finger until the hole lines up. That's often a good trick. Same on the other side. There we go, now that's secure. So as I mentioned earlier, just make sure that these rails are actually straight. This one is fine obviously, but I have had laptops where, because it's been dropped, one of the rails is bent, and then when you try and put the screw in, it's going to bend the panel to match the rail, and then that's just going to snap across the middle, which is not very pleasant. And as for tightness, I'm not doing up these screws super tight because you don't want to shred the threads on them. No screw in a computer needs to be done up really tight, to be honest. You just need the screw to bite into the thread. So I'm just doing it up till it stops and then just giving it just a slight tweak so it's not going to come undone on its own accord. It's not like these things are actually being strained or anything, so it's not like a car when you want to savage the screws up so they're not going to fall off while you're driving it. Right, job's done. Now I highly recommend, if it's at all possible, powering up the computer before you put the bezel back on, so that way if something's wrong you don't have to take it all apart all over again. So have I got any power in this? Yes I have, I've got some battery power, so there we go. Now just see if that starts for us, and off it goes. Now you can't see it very well on the picture, it is actually working. However, if a panel hasn't been used for a long time, especially the older panels, it will quite often be a very, very dim picture. This is normal. When a cold cathode hasn't been on for a long time, it'll be very dim. Give it 5 minutes. Shut up. Give it 5 minutes to warm up, and the display will brighten up. The exception to this is I have seen before. Sometimes the brightness can be down, so I'm just gonna. There it is. That's the case here. Just whack that brightness up, and there you go. You can see there we've got an actual picture now. The other case can be if you're fixing a Dell laptop. Dell laptops have very strange brightness controls, I've found. A lot of the time, if you get a generic panel that's not specifically for your Dell laptop, you might find that the brightness control doesn't work properly. And out of, say, 5 brightness settings, it starts on low, it gets brighter, and it gets slightly brighter. Then all of a sudden, when you go to the next stage, it gets dim again. There's nothing you can do about this. It's just the wrong panel. I've fought against this before, and the only thing you can do is just admit that you've got the wrong panel and get another one. So if you're fixing a Dell laptop, I highly recommend making sure you buy a panel that is specifically designated for Dell. And if you've got this fault, then your supplier's ripped you off and you need to get on the blower to him and sort that out. Right, so this is all working just fine now. So if it's a brand new panel, you might have some cellophane across the top or something like that. This is normally the point where I tear that off. You can see there's some masking tape on the side of this one where previously it has had that there, but just rip that off at this stage and then fit your bezel again. Right, you've just got to hook this over any latching hooks you've got at the top here, line it up with the holes, and then just literally just press it so it all clicks into place. Like so. Don't be too worried about getting it to click into place first time, just keep going around until you've got a nice straight edge. The bottom can often be a problem here. I just put my hand down the back of the laptop so I can press on both sides. Like that. Oh, I've done this slightly wrong. I've got a notch that's supposed to go in first there, so I'm just going to have to pull that back off and just line that up. There we go. Oh dear, looks like my battery just died. There we go, that's all good. Right, screws back in. There's my screw with the glue on it. So actually, I need to take one of these back out again. Once again, using my screwdriver somewhat cack-handed so I can show you what I'm doing. Please forgive me. Last one. Done. Right, now all my rubber pads here, these should just push straight back into place, like so. Sometimes these can be a bit fiddly. Sometimes, rather than being rubber pads, they're literally just like plastic covers. So sometimes you need a pair of tweezers or something to get them in place. You know, whatever you need to do, they just push back on. So however you want to do it, just go straight ahead. If you find that any of the sticky pads on these are perished and not sticking properly, the only real solution to that is to find some kind of replacement glue. I wouldn't advise using super glue or something like that. You want something that's removable again, just in case. Personally, I have double-sided tape. I buy very thin stuff on eBay. If you search for double-sided tape tissue, you get this really thin stuff, which is pretty much what they use here anyway. You can buy that on a roll for like £2 for a whole roll of it. So if you're doing this all the time, that's what you want to use. Otherwise, just find a chum who's got some or anything like that. Even use a hot glue gun if you can, just a tiny little smidge there. That will do the job if you've got one of those lying around. Otherwise, there we have it, all sorted. So just close that, and then I usually just look around the back just to make sure all the lines are straight. We haven't got a gap along here, and that's it. One finished laptop.